What's up guys? Welcome to AnimeKouhai, an extension of Anime Senpai PH channel. All pieces of information are derived from the light novel. In today's video, we will continue Chapter 6, Volume 7 of the light novel, entitled Gods and Demon Lords. This video is the third part of Chapter 6 in our Tensura spoiler video series. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, feel free to check out the links in the description below. Now, let's get to the video. The crystal ball Edward took out was held high above his head to ensure the press on hand could see it. It depicted a very haggard-looking Rahim, perhaps after a torture session or two. Rahim was shouting that he had no intention of betraying them and asking forgiveness. One could tell a new viewer that this was footage of Rahim's final moments in this world, and they would believe it. Diablo asked what this piece of evidence proved. Edward laughed back because he clearly considered it a foolish question. Edward stressed that Lady Glenda over there brought this piece of evidence to them. Edward accused Diablo of infiltrating Lubelius and killing Rahim. Edward continued that perhaps Diablo thought that mere threats would cow him into doing his bidding. But Rahim's faith had outlasted his terror, so Diablo had feared Rahim telling the world about his crimes, and it had led Diablo to do this. Edward looked down at Diablo, all but daring him to respond. Diablo's smile remained intact. Diablo said how impressive that a mere human being was able to overcome his fear of him. That was a rather funny joke. Edward told him to stop dodging the question. Diablo had seen the evidence against him, and he could not merely talk his way out of it. Diablo said enough in silence. Diablo's quiet voice cut off the nuking as Edward was trying to show his full dignity to the press. For a single moment, Diablo's smile disappeared, replacing it with a hideous, barren, unfathomable terror. Diablo said this charade was over, and he could not enjoy a battle of wits if they neglected to bring any with them to the contest. The words were enough to freeze Edward where he stood. Diablo explained that he had thought about explaining the truth in detail to prove his innocence, but he saw that would be a waste of time. Humans were wired, after all, to believe only what they wanted to believe. But there was an easier way to prove his case. The change in Diablo's attitude intimidated Edward. Only now did Edward realize that this approach of his might not have been the most intelligent idea. Diablo continued that he would prove his innocence, and if anybody here was able to overcome their fear of him, he would gladly admit defeat. Diablo cautioned them that he had never been defeated before, and if they sought to defy him, then they had to be prepared to face the consequences. Diablo's voice was just as calm as always, but within those golden eyes of his, a pair of crimson pupils burned with rage. If this were only for himself, Diablo could have still held himself in check, but Edward had decided to cruelly slander Rimuru as well. And at that moment, Edward's luck ran out. The fear-stricken Edward shouted his order to his soldiers to kill Diablo and engage this demon menace at once. The demon hunters that had mixed in with the soldiers guarding the king were waiting for this order. They all simultaneously leaped out and attacked Diablo. The demon hunters told Diablo that it was too easy to overcome their fear of him. He might think himself invincible as an archdemon, but they stumbled across demons like him in their homeland all the time. No demon could survive for long if one pulverized their physical form, and that applied just as much to an archdemon. They had done their homework on how to handle demons like him, and Diablo must stop counting them humans out. The hunters worked in tandem as they shouted at him and went into a lethal formation. They had a laser focus on Diablo, despite what their bold insults would imply. Diablo, after all, had a name, and the name the Archdemon was a level above the norm threat-wise. By swinging special compound alloy chains imbued with the holy element, the demon hunters had successfully pinned Diablo down and bound his arms and legs. Their very first move had succeeded, and it made them let up on their caution just a bit. The Eastern Empire, for better or for worse, had more experience with marauding demons than the Western nations. This was supposedly because of a demon stronghold in the East that held sway over a gigantic amount of power. But either way, it also meant that demon hunters really were well-trained fighters in the art of anti-demon tactics. An archdemon was strictly the stuff of legend in the West, but eastward, they had conducted extensive research on demons, dividing them into categories and coming up with strategies for each type. The leader of the demon hunters had pegged Diablo as a medieval age demon, but considering his named status, it seemed sounder to treat him as an ancient one instead. A member of the demon nobility, gifted with massive power, intelligence, and perhaps even a vast army of kin. The threat could not be underestimated, but the leader still believed in their chances at victory. He had experienced several archdemon fights himself, and he had never doubted the decision-making skills he learned from those battles. Diablo clarified that he would appreciate a starting signal once they had made their preparations. The leader failed to understand what the serene demon meant. He hid his concern and tried to sound as defiant as possible. He asked if Diablo was saying that he would not get in their way no matter what they did. Diablo responded why he would. With all the effort they were clearly putting in, he didn't want to interfere. This would just make the fear that much more vivid. The leader laughed back and said that this demon should stop toying with them, because his arrogance would be his end. Diablo's joking around sent a slight chill across the demon hunters' minds. Demons like him often look down on people in order to overestimate their own skills. With that knowledge in mind, Diablo wasn't venturing far from the typical demon script. This time though, he was delivering these lines while already chained to the ground. Even a seasoned demon hunter would be put off by this much confidence. Still, these were professionals. They didn't delay a single beat and executed on the training routines they repeated day after day. The hunter's leader told Diablo that he should regret his arrogance in hell and ordered his men to vanquish him right away with Thunderbolt, the latest in anti-demon technology. As King Edward, journalists from nations worldwide, Saare, and the rest of the Lubellian royal guard looked on, Diablo was roasted by blinding flashes of electricity. The demon hunters mocked Diablo and told him how about that, what non-magical infused lightning tasted like to him. They knew that a demon like Diablo was protected by layers of barriers. They teased Diablo that it was too bad for him because with their imperial technology, they could break right through his defenses. Demons had to be granted physical form to impose their will upon this world. The demon hunters mocked Diablo that with his body destroyed, there was nothing he could do. The demon hunters seemed to treat their victory as a given. Any magical-driven force could be easily blocked by a barrier built for the purpose. In response, the Eastern Empire had researched weapons that didn't rely on magic to work. This lightning trick was one of them, the latest in anti-demon technology. Edward heard this, and it made the king's terror ease a bit. Edward shouted wonderful, and that truly, the demon hunters were the heroes of the East. He had to raise his reward for that merchant. Edward's face was twisted in glee as he looked at Diablo. It appeared that the lightning was roasting the demon alive. The flashes of light had fully enveloped his body by now, but that smile was still on Diablo's lips. Only Saare and Glenda picked up on this at first, and it worried them. The demon hunter's leader, however, was puzzling over something else. He said that this shouldn't be happening. He wondered why there wasn't a single burn mark on his clothing. Then he was blown away when he saw that evil smile on Diablo's face. Diablo laughed and told them it was a rather meager effort, or too meager in fact. They thought this would suffice against Diablo. After all that hard work, he couldn't help but call it a disappointment. Diablo casually brought an arm up. The moment he did, the chains binding him shattered. With unbelievable force, Diablo ripped the reinforced alloy chains off his body. Everybody was shocked and terrified. He laughed at the words of shock from the leader's mouth and said, as if nothing had just happened, that it was time for the selection test. The leader said this was insanity and asked why the lightning didn't work on him. Out of disbelief, or perhaps to divert his impending terror, the leader had to ask the question. Diablo was kind enough to provide a detailed reply. Diablo explained that he was equipped with a strong resistance to natural influences, electrical discharge included. Their attack just now was such a meager strike at him. It didn't even merit building a defensive barrier to counter it. Diablo asked the leader if his reply was satisfactory. The leader began to visibly shake. If anything, that was brave of him, because the rest of the hunters had already fallen screaming to the ground after realizing the portent behind Diablo's statement. These were first-class demon hunters, fearless, battle-trained warriors, and they weren't alone, except for the protected journalists. Everybody witnessing the scene felt their spines freeze solid. Edward fainted right where he stood, foaming at the mouth, and so did his royal guard. The leader could see what just happened well enough. It was this overwhelming terror, the sheer pressure this demon was sending their way. To put it as simple as possible, all Diablo did was to unleash the full brunt of his aura, but that aura was daunting enough in itself to kill. Diablo was impressed to find out that 3 of them had passed the test. He supposed they did deserve praise for withstanding his lord's ambition. Diablo told them that they hereby had his permission to engage him. The leader heard this, and even as he felt the terror closing around his throat, the leader turned around. There, just as Diablo promised, were the 2 others left standing, Saara and Glenda, the young man and the wild beauty. The sight of them seemingly unfazed helped the leader rally his exhausted mind. He said that it's still alright because the battle sages didn't let them down, and they were truly the heroes of the West. His hunters might be done for, but with these 2 on hand, victory could yet be theirs. The leader felt encouraged and turned back toward Diablo to tell him that Diablo was every bit his demon lord's servant, because it was no doubt that Diablo was just as good at bluffing as his master. That's it for this video, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you will never miss the upcoming continuation of Tensura spoiler video series. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shout out to the top 10 commenters on my previous video. Shout out to Jamie Ira, Rival Sakiln, Joji Ray, Hashira Ishish, Amiral Tempest, John Lester, Kawan Shuan, Leia Victor Adaneda, Rem Baru, and last but not the least, shout out to Pa Shout Out Senpai. I'll see you guys in the next video.